Greetings and welcome to episode 18 of the Old Patrol HQ podcast. I'm your host, Gil Maza. This podcast is dedicated to celebrating and preserving the history, heritage, and legacy of the Old Patrol through the words of those who lived it, with a few shenanigans along the way. We are in for another epic podcast episode with retired Associate Chief Gary Labbe as he relates to us his first-hand account of the very first Bortac class. Yes, the story of Bortac 1 exclusively at Old Patrol HQ. Ain't no patrol like the Old Patrol. Honor first, honor always. Good morning, sir, and welcome back to the Old Patrol HQ podcast.
Good morning, Gil. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you too, sir. The last time we talked, we had a very enlightening and revealing interview discussing the making of Borderline, that movie with Charles Bronson, and that podcast has gotten so many listens and it's been so well received. And the pictures you sent me also, I posted them recently. I know you saw them, and boy, everybody got a kick out of those.
Yeah, I'm glad that I was able to document that part of the borderline history. And ironically, for those who listen to the podcast, which you and I discussed later, the day after my podcast on Borderline, the actor Wilford Brimley died.
Yes.
Which was a little eerie for me when I turned on the news, and after having done the podcast the day before, and here they have the well-known character actor Wilford Brimley died today. And ironically, he died the same age as Ab Taylor. Wilford was 88 and Ab was 88 when he died.
No kidding.
Yeah, so like I said, I thought that was a little strange, but hey, that's just wanted to fill in the people that had listened to that first podcast with this little update.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, we're going a whole different direction this podcast, aren't we?
Yeah, this podcast is going to be on Bortac 1. My experiences with the Bortac 1 class in Louisiana, and I'll briefly cover some of the incidents that the Bortac team was involved in, some that I participated in, and some that my fellow agents participated in. So some of this will be first-hand knowledge, and some will be second-hand knowledge, but it's all verified.
Yes, sir. And I know that we talked about that you wanted to start out by offering a special tribute.
Yeah, I'd like to dedicate this particular Bortac podcast to my good friend Dave Roberson, who was the air operations supervisor in Yuma sector. Dave was part of Bortac 1. As a matter of fact, the photo of the Bortac 1 class, Dave is seated directly behind me over my left shoulder. And I just wanted to pay homage to him with dedicating this to him and the sacrifice he made. And if I may, I'd like to read the brief official report of his tragic airplane accident that took his life. It goes like this. On July 14th, 1989, Pilot Roberson departed the Marine Corps Air Station, Yuma, Arizona, at 5:50 a.m. in serviced aircraft. Shortly after takeoff, he responded to a request for assistance in the Yuma freight yards where Border Patrol units were conducting freight train check operations. At 6:10 a.m., Pilot Roberson departed the freight yard area, proceeded
Wow.
And like I said, Dave was an easygoing guy, and he'd give you the shirt off his back. I mean, really nice guy, dedicated agent. So while he's sign cutting, while maintaining radio contact with Senior Patrol Agent David Ramirez and Patrol Agent Rosendo Gillen, who were working in the immediate area on the trail, at 6:24 a.m., Pilot Roberson stalled the aircraft and crashed. The aircraft was totally destroyed by the impact, and post-crash fire, Pilot Roberson died instantly. Very tragic, like I said, for such a really nice guy, like I said. And Dave, just adding a little bit of humor to Dave's history. When Dave showed up at Camp Beauregard, Louisiana, he had brought his golf clubs with him, and everybody got a kick out of that because we didn't know what to expect there, and Dave figured this is going to be a typical Border Patrol detail where I'll be able to go out on the golf course and play some golf on our off day. Anyway, they honed in on Dave from day one.
Oh man, I can imagine.
Yeah, he was, like I said, he became a target right off the bat of the Marshals. Anyway, like I said, I just wanted to give this brief dedication to Dave in his memory.
Well, thank you for honoring us with that.
Sure. And now getting to Bortac. Initially, Bortac, which was an all-volunteer unit, formed in 1984, and basically the reason they formed Bortac is in response to an increased threat of riots at several of the service's processing centers, mainly Miami, Chrome North, Oakdale, Louisiana. Over the next couple of years, we were in and out of there constantly, and they figured they needed a unit to respond to support not only the Border Patrol but the district offices with the problems they were having. And initially, the initial mission statement that I was part of compiling was the mission of Bortac was to provide, at that time, INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, with a highly trained and specially equipped tactical unit to rapidly respond to unusual law enforcement situations requiring special tactics and techniques. The mission pretty much, as far as I know, remained the same over the years, except it expanded. From a statement that I got here from 2008, they referred to Bortac as the Global Special Response Team for the Department of Homeland Security, Bureau of Customs and Border Protection, CBP. Its mission is to respond to terrorist threats of all types anywhere in the world in order to protect our nation's homeland. Its agents are counted among the nation's most dedicated and highly trained special operators. Like I said, the mission has expanded. It's pretty much based along the same lines as the initial formation, and just inform a lot of the people listening that aren't aware of some of Bortac's special operation. Just want to briefly cover some of the call-out In '84, we were at Chrome North in Miami. In '87, at Marana Detention Center in Arizona. '87, Oakdale Detention Center in Louisiana. '87, the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary riots, which I'll cover a little more in detail in a few minutes. And in 1992, the LA riots having to do with the Rodney King incidents. I'm sure some of the people are familiar with. And as far as national security, Bortac was involved in Summer Olympics in LA, counterterrorism security details at U.S. international airports during Operation Desert Storm, and security details in Arizona ports of entry in response to civil disturbances in Mexico. Natural disasters, just to name a few. In '82, Hurricane Andrew in South Florida, security, law enforcement, humanitarian assistance. '95, Hurricane Marilyn in the Virgin Islands. At that time, I was chief of Puerto Rico Rainy Sector, which had an oversight of the Virgin Islands, and I specifically requested Bortac assistance. We were trying to locate a few of the immigration inspectors from the Virgin Islands that couldn't be located, so I requested Bortac assistance. They gladly responded and did locate the inspectors who had lost their homes during the hurricane. And then again in '98, Hurricane George in Puerto Rico. When they came down, they mainly provided security for the offices and the sectors, and assisted the local police. Foreign deployments, very numerous. I'm sure people will be surprised to find out that Bortac was involved in the following countries: Bolivia, Guatemala, El Salvador, Paraguay, Uruguay, Brazil, Panama, Belize, Haiti, Tunisia, Latvia, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, South Africa, United Arab Emirates, Oman, the Republic of Yemen, Morocco, Lithuania, Estonia, and the Republic of Georgia. And I'm sure Bortac agents that participated in those deployments can speak better to a lot of these than I can, because I wasn't involved in a lot of them. But, any Bortac agents that want to contact you and elaborate on that, I'm sure they can do a better job than I can.
That's amazing,
anyway,
though.
I just wanted to give that brief history, like I said, to show the extent of Bortac operations, which I'm sure not too many people, unless they're actually involved with Bortac, were aware of some of the missions and the complexities and the many countries that Bortac, and most recently, even Iraq, where Bortac was deployed to Iraq to assist our troops. I have a photo here of a Bortac agent, paramedic, treating shrapnel wounds from an exploded IED in Iraq, treating one of the soldiers. So like I said, their operations are highly unpublicized, but they've been very extensive.
Yeah, I know when I first came in, you heard whispers of whispers of that kind of stuff. I mean, there was just a rumor and innuendo in regards to the fact that we had gone to participated in other countries in operations. We meaning the Bortacers. And it wasn't until the advent of social media where you kind of get a hint based on a few pictures and things people said on Old Patrol or on Legacy, where they post pictures of guys in camis and in camouflage gear, talking, just hinting at operations in all over the world.
Yeah, and like I said, a lot of it was kept purposely hushed up. I think for the protection of the agents, and then confidentiality agreements that were signed, because a lot of these international assistants could have created havoc in the press, where claiming that, we were assisting governments that weren't friendly to the U.S., or, like I said, the press tends to put a negative spin on a lot of things, especially nowadays.
Yes.
And I think it was mainly a upper echelon decision, headquarters and DOJ and the Attorney General's office, and even the White House, to keep a lot of these things as secretive as possible. Just recently, when I'm watching the riots in Seattle and Milwaukee, I could see that some of the agents there, I noticed the Border Patrol patch on one, and I knew it was Bortac. I knew they had been sent there to quell the riots, and so like I said, to this day, it continues. Getting back to Bortac 1.
All right.
Initially, when I put in for Bortac, I was on the Canadian border. When I got to the Canadian border, I quickly found the drastic change in activity coming from Southern California to Northern Maine. At the time, San Diego, Chula Vista sector, during any given 8-hour shift, we would apprehend 1,500 aliens. During the late 70s, early 80s, we were right out straight. So I transferred to my home area of Northern Maine, where we were actually given a quota of apprehending 5 aliens a month. So you can see from 1,500 to 5 aliens was a drastic change.
Yeah.
I'll cover that more when I do a podcast on the Canadian border. But
Okay.
anyway, my driving force behind joining Bortac was mainly because of the boredom, and I saw it as a great opportunity to get some training, advanced training, which I knew would be coming down the pike with Bortac. So I applied. Initially, we had physical requirements that we had to perform at sector, which would be verified by a sector agent. Mainly a supervisor at sector that could verify that we were qualified to become part of Bortac, and that was only part of the process. There was a background check on your work and talk to your fellow agents, but as far as I can remember, I know we had to do 100 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, 10 or 15 pull-ups from a dead hang, run the mile under 10 minutes, and there was also a swimming qualification which they were going to put us through when we got to Bortac training, which I'll cover later. But anyway, Horse Barracks, the old Army training center. And you could tell that a lot of the buildings were really old. I mean, they were, some of them were a little bit dilapidated. And the base, I believe, was being occasionally used as a National Guard training site also for the Louisiana National Guard.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I took a flight, flew down there, and we had to, I forget, I changed planes, I think maybe in Atlanta, and I had to take an airline at the time, which was named Air South. I had never heard of Air South, but anyway, boarded the plane, and we would later refer to Air South as Air Death after we did a few excursions down to Louisiana, because it was one of the shakiest airplanes I had ever been on. I mean, these were twin-engine Cessnas. We would hit a lot of turbulence. When we got to the runway, it was the shortest runway I had ever seen. I couldn't believe that they were going to land there, but anyway, we survived the initial landing. We're transported to Camp Beauregard, and at the time, the unit that the government had contracted with to instruct us was the U.S. Marshals SOG unit, Special Operations Group. At the time, they were the premier tactical unit in federal law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
So you figured, that's who we were going to go with. And none of us at the time had any idea, I'm sure, of what this training would entail. We showed up there pretty much blind to anything that was facing us for the next few weeks. We quickly found out when we got there, when I got off the bus, and they pointed to the barracks where we'd be sleeping in, staying in. I noticed a friend of mine, Pete Moran, and Pete was the intelligence agent in Holton at the time, later became assistant chief in Holton sector, and then eventually chief patrol agent in Buffalo, New York.
Mm-hmm.
Pete was standing at the end of the barracks pushing a broom. He had gotten there early the day before, and they had tasked him with cleaning the barracks, because obviously they hadn't been cleaned in some time. They still had cobwebs and stuff like that. So I knew this was a bad start to the training, and one of my friends and fellow agents is cleaning the barracks. And it pretty much went downhill from there. Once everybody arrived, there were quite a few of us in that initial session. I know 24 of us made it through. Initially, I'm guessing there were probably 50 or more that came from every sector in the U.S. But what they did is they lined all of us outside. It was driving rain. I mean, this was spring. This was May of '98. The weather was terrible. You were all standing out there literally for hours waiting to see what was going to transpire. They'd have us stand out there and wait for the next busload of trainees to show up. The marshals would come right in our faces and start yelling at us. This was almost like, I felt like I was back in boot camp. It was almost like Paris Island Marine Corps type training, and I came later to find out that a lot of the marshals were former Marine Corps.
Yeah.
So like I said, they got in our faces, they started yelling at us, saying, "What the hell are you guys doing here? You're all heading home tomorrow. You're not going to make it through this here." And anyway, like I said, it was a great start to the training. the marshals made I guess, the error of taping the first session of Bortac. And I referred to it as an error because when I got back to Maine and showed the training tape that we had gone through, nobody from the sector ever volunteered for Bortac after watching. And I think that's probably what they wanted.
Probably.
Not only were they eliminating us, they were eliminating any future applicants, which is the reason for the date. Anyway, they, like I said, discontinued, and then they said, all right, they filed us into this auditorium, and we thought, God, finally, we get to sit down, take a break from the rain. We were all soaking wet. Poor Dave, like I mentioned earlier, Dave was standing there I can still see him standing there with his golf bag hunched over his shoulder, which by that time was probably half full of water.
Yeah.
And anyway, they filed us into the auditorium, and they had the chief marshal get on the stage. This was, like I said, they had seating for all of us in a little stage, and the chief marshal laid into the welcome, which, again, I think we only got the opening welcome remark, and then they blanked out the rest of it because it was so terrible.
Yeah.
Like I said, we didn't really, and nobody there felt welcome. Everybody was telling themselves, what the hell am I doing here? Why did I volunteer for this terrible dilemma that they're putting us through?
Yeah.
Anyway, like I said, they kept us up well past midnight with their indoctrination, what they expected of us. They said, we know a lot of you guys were tested by your friends back home at Sector. Well, we're going to test you tomorrow and find out if you really passed our requirements. So we had that to look forward to.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think we finally let us hit the sack around 2 in the morning. I mean, we're all, like I said, we're all on these bunks in the same room, and guys were, starting to say, were expressing their thoughts about what they thought about the first day. And I think the marshals had the room bugged. They were listening to us complaining. Anyway, like I said, 2 in the morning, we finally doze off. About 4 in the morning, they come into the barracks, banging garbage cans. They actually had these metal garbage cans to wake us up.
Yeah, I remember those.
You can imagine the shock. Here we are, we barely got an hour or 2 sleep, and they're waking us up at 4 in the morning, telling us to get ready for formation. They had a formation at 5 o'clock every morning, the whole time we were there. One of the other aspects of the formation is, as the days went on, we would notice that there were fewer and fewer of us. We'd line up in the morning and there'd be 1 or 2 missing. And then again the next morning there'd be 1 or 2 missing. What they were doing is they were eliminating people one by one that they felt shouldn't be there for no apparent reason other than they were wheedling us down.
Wow.
Like I said, they even, what the marshals would do is they would call you in the evening and sit you at a round table where there were 5 or 6 of the marshals, and they would try to convince you that you should resign, that the training should not continue, because you weren't fit, you weren't qualified, and obviously it got to some of the guys because they weren't too happy to start with.
Yeah.
They said, we've already put up with all the crap we're going to put up with, sure, I'll head home tomorrow. And then it came down to, they decided they were going to pull me in and the fellow Bortacer, John France. Now, John was a black belt in karate. The only thing that was a little negative about John was he smoked. And he smoked during our training.
Oh.
And I think that really got to the marshals, where during a break, he'd whip out a cigarette and light up. So they figured he had to go, even though he was more than qualified to be there. And then with myself, I was a marathon runner at the time. I had started running marathons in California, half marathons. I moved on. When I moved to Maine, I became actually addicted to running. I would work all day and go out and run for a couple hours at night. On weekends, I'd run 20, 25 miles on a stretch. And, I got, like I said, and then I started running marathons. I ran the first marathon in Maine, which was an endurance marathon. I ran two Montreal, Canada marathons. So I was pretty well in shape for any type of physical activity. But they decided, and they had seen that in my background, and they figured, we're going to be running these guys to death, so I think Labbe needs to go. They told me, they said, Labbe, you're too quiet. You're not a team player from what we can tell. You need to resign, to voluntarily resign. Well, both John and I were a little obstinate and pretty well fed up with what they were feeding us, so we just looked at them and told them, there's no way in hell we're going to resign. You want us gone, you terminate us,
Yeah.
So then they figured out, well, we're not going to convince these guys. So they let us go back to the barracks. Well, the following morning at 5 in the morning, we're all standing out there in formation, and this little Louisiana marshal, handlebar mustache, comes right up to my face, and he's 2 inches away from my nose, and he just, in front of everybody, says, Labbe, I'm going to run your ass into the ground today.
Yeah.
So I can still see my fellow agents standing there, where everybody went, oh my God. They all knew I was a marathon runner, and I had told them the only time I rest is when I'm running. I can actually rest while I run. So everybody's going, oh my God, they're going to try and run Labbe into the ground, and we're part of the running.
Yeah.
Because everybody ran together.
Oh, man.
So like I said, I can still see the look on their eyes. And then another agent that has since passed away, a good friend of mine, that, again, I dedicated it to Dave Roberson, and I'd like to dedicate this to Big Bob Dubé from Swanton Sector. Bob had been PAIC up there, and Bob was 250, about 6'3", 6'4", and he wasn't a runner. As a matter of fact, a lot of the guys weren't runners. It wasn't their thing, but I can still see Bob's face there. So I went up to Bob and I said, don't worry, Bob. They had me set the pace of the run. I said, this is going to be the slowest pace. This is going to be the slowest 5-mile run we're going on. And I would set the pace, and then I'd circle back to the rear where Bob was huffing and puffing. And I'd try and encourage him, say, Bob, we only got a couple more miles. Hang in there. Because the minute you dropped out of drinking. If they were able to weed you out by, physically running you into the ground, then you're done. So anyway, Bob made it. He started to get in better shape as the days went on.
Well, good.
So anyway, like I said, this continued, and like I said, we found out they had a young marshal there who had just gotten out of the Marine Corps, and he was a drill instructor in the Marine Corps. Well, they used him to try and run us into the ground. Now, the start of our runs, normally if you're a runner, you stretch, you stretch your muscles and you get into the running mode. Well, this guy, ex-drill instructor, had us do 100 jumping jacks. Now, jumping jacks will tighten your muscles if you're doing jumping jacks.
Mm-hmm.
So this was his intro to our run. Do 100 jumping jacks. And I've got this all on video. They had have us do push-ups and sit-ups, all kinds of calisthenics, and just, like I said, to make sure that somebody would drop out. And eventually, some guys had to drop out. They just couldn't go on anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, like I said, this continued. Then they told us, I forgot, they had tested us to make sure we could do the 50 sit-ups, the 100 push-ups, and the chin-ups and all that. So everybody pretty well got through that. Then they said, we're going to test your swimming capabilities, where we would have to swim the length of the pool 3 or 4 times. And they had a pool right there at the training camp. The next day they bring us to the pool, and they use a marshal to demonstrate what we needed to do as far as the swimming. So everybody pretty well got through the swimming. It wasn't that hard to swim to one end of the pool to the other.
Mm-hmm.
When they saw that everybody had done that, they said, we're going to teach you a technique called drown proofing. Now, I had never heard of drown proofing. They said, this is how it's going to go. And they demonstrated by using one of the marshals and handcuffing him. He jumped off the diving board into the pool and demonstrated. Now, the drown proofing technique is you just float in the water, basically at a 90-degree angle,
Mm-hmm.
with your head underwater and your legs hanging in the pool, in the water. And you do that for as long as you can hold your breath. And then when you can't hold your breath anymore, you bring both your arms up and break the water as you're coming up. And as you're coming up, you open your mouth once you've cleared the water, and you take a deep breath. Then you go back down. So this was the drown proofing technique. No practice or anything. Like I said, we went right into it.
Wow.
So here's, they had us jump off in teams of 2. Now, the guy I was teamed up with was Ed Duda. Now, Ed was a good friend of mine from upstate New York. Ed was a chief up in Swanton sector eventually, after Bortac, after he survived. And Ed wasn't real fond of swimming. Wasn't his forte. So I noticed, I'm getting the technique down and, floating along, and I noticed Ed breaks water, but takes a deep breath before he's cleared the water, so he starts choking.
Mm.
And I'm going, oh my God, because he got a gulp of pool water, and he's choking. So I grabbed Ed, and I brought him to the side of the pool. Well, the marshals couldn't believe that, that we had disobeyed them, because they had warned us, don't help anybody in the pool. Somebody's drowning, let him drown. That was their, we don't want to see any of you helping your partners or doing anything. So anyway, they pulled us both out of the pool and had us do 100 push-ups right there on the side of the pool because of what had happened. in case you're captured or kidnapped and somebody throws you into the water, then you guys will be able to survive.
Yeah.
I couldn't really think of any scenario where that would happen to us, but anyway, now the other thing with the training, they had brought in cooks from the Louisiana State Prison. These were inmates that were cooking for us.
No kidding.
So you had to be a little leery where they knew we were all law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I could still see them there in the kitchen looking at us, cooking.
Wow.
And the marshals would tell them to cook big meals for us. We'd go in for lunch and they'd be cooking steaks, And then we had rules to abide by in the dining hall. We sat four to a table and we had to eat at attention. And we couldn't talk to one another. We couldn't even look at one another. The marshal says, I don't want to see any of you looking at each other. I don't want to see any of you talking, and you're to stay at attention. So naturally our appetites sort of went downhill when we were under those terrible restrictions. Now they would let us, and some of the guys were really hungry, so and I was never a meat eater, so I didn't care for steak anyway. But anyway, guys would, because you only had a certain amount of time to hurry up and eat. It wasn't a relaxed atmosphere where they gave you 10 or 15 minutes to clean your plate. So then, in the middle of our eating, they would say, okay, everybody get up. They'd take us out to the obstacle course just after having eaten.
Oh.
And the obstacle course was a special forces type. I've never seen an obstacle course like that in my life. We had huge walls that we had to climb up and rappel off of. We had to go under barbed wire in the mud. It was, like I said, it was an obstacle course that, and again, if you didn't make it through the obstacle course, you're out. So you can imagine, after having eaten and then take us out to that obstacle course.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we learned from that day on not to eat much.
Yeah.
I think I lost 15 or 20 pounds, while I was there for a few weeks. I actually have a photo that if I can dig it up, I'll send it to you, where Buck Brandemule at the time, the chief of the Border Patrol, came to our graduation ceremony, and they took a photo of me shaking his hand, and I looked like I came out of Auschwitz death camp.
Wow. Yeah.
I had lost, and I wasn't big to start with. I was a marathon runner.
Yeah.
I probably weighed 130, 140, soaking wet. So, I was, like I said, I was into running. So I had kept the weight off over the last few years, pretty much. But, and even after I got home, my wife would tell me, you woke me up last night in the middle of the night screaming. I would have nightmares where, I would actually end up screaming in the middle of the night. That's how intense this training session had been.
Man.
Now, on top of that, we had been there over a week and we weren't allowed to do anything, to go anywhere. It was not a typical Border Patrol detail. You were confined to where you were at. We weren't even allowed to make phone calls, and back then there weren't any cell phones. But the base had one payphone booth, and the marshals one day after we'd been there over a week says, okay, you guys have 15 minutes to run to the phone booth, call home, and then get your butt back here. Well, you can imagine.
Yeah.
Again, being a runner, I was the first one to make it to the phone booth, dial my home home phone number for collect call. My wife picked up. I said, listen, I've only got about 30 seconds. I just wanted to let you know that I made it all right, and I may be home tomorrow. Just, so anyway, and I can just picture my wife going, yeah, right, you're on a detail there, and you're
living it up.
Yeah, but anyway, that was our one phone call that we were granted, and most of the guys didn't even get to make a phone call because they were still huffing and puffing. They didn't even try to get to the phone booth. They just turned around and headed back. Just pointing out some of the things that we had to go through.
Yes.
Another thing I want to highlight is one of our instructors, and he was one of the good guys, one of the good marshals. Not all of them were anal. There were a couple that I'm sure felt sorry for us, and knew that some of these other guys were going a little bit overboard. Now, one of the marshals was Jim Deegan. Now, Jim was the marshal who was killed at Ruby Ridge not long after our training. The marshals responded, for people that aren't familiar with the Ruby Ridge incident, Randy Weaver been classified as a white supremacist. A warrant out for him for ATF firearms violation. He had been actually targeted by the ATF and the marshals and the FBI. They just, didn't want any white supremacists drumming up further hate in Idaho. They responded to his cabin. He was staying at the cabin with his 14-year-old son, his wife who had recently given birth. They had a newborn, and a friend of his. And when they responded to the cabin, there was a standoff. He had a bunch of firearms, and he obviously subscribed to the white supremacy theory, and he decided to hold up and hold them at bay.
Yeah.
But for some reason, his son went out with the dog, and his son was armed, his 14-year-old son. And they knew that the marshals were in the area, but he figured, I'm going to take the dog out for a run or whatever. Anyway, long story short, Randy Weaver's son confronted Jim Deegan. It's still unclear to this day as to what transpired, because they're both dead. I mean, he shot Randy Weaver's son. Randy Weaver's son shot him. They even shot the dog. And his friend, Randy Weaver's friend, made it back to the cabin to report what had happened. So things got real heated from that point on. White supremacists from all over the country started showing up and protesting that they were going after Randy Weaver. Anyway, the FBI special response team showed up. They had a sniper on the team, and the sniper honed in on the front door, ended up tragically shooting and killing Randy Weaver's wife while she was holding the baby in her arms.
Oh.
Shot and killed her. Now that was obviously a dumb, tragic call by the FBI. I have no idea what, and there were subsequent investigations into it, and things were obviously covered up. But anyway, after his wife was shot and killed, he surrendered. So that ended. But that's where, like I said, where Jim Deegan was killed. And then Jim had taught us rappelling. That was his part of the training, and I think some of the photos I sent you, there's a photo of John France coming down the wall, and normally rappelling, you rappel backwards.
Yeah.
Well, Jim taught us the Australian rappel,
right,
where you
rappel
rappel forward. that scared the hell out of them. But we eventually got the knack of it, and so like I said, he was one of the better guys that had a little more patience with us and taught us, a little more with the technique. Because that's one thing I found during that first Bortac session. We didn't really learn much because it wasn't their goal to have us absorb anything. They just wanted to break us down. Even the firing range, they took us out to the firing range at 5 in the morning. We'd be there till midnight all day. They'd bring out sandwiches, that the inmates had made for us, which we were leery of to start with. And we'd be shooting all day, and it was nothing like the Border Patrol qualification. They had made up scenarios, and a scenario where you stand a foot from the target, draw and fire. I can still see, I think it was Jim Grasky drawing and putting his 357 right through the target, through the paper target, because we were standing so close to the damn target.
Yeah.
But anyway, like I said, that ended up, Pete Moran, at the time that I mentioned earlier, Pete had problems with his feet. And during that marathon section of the firing range, his feet swelled up to where he couldn't even get his boots on. So Pete had to resign, ironically, because of that whole day and night of being at the firing range. Another thing they did is night live firing, which we had never experienced. I mean, they actually had marshals out there firing rounds. We were laying down in the dirt. They wanted us to see what it felt like to come under fire. Well, that was another scary incident, when you're real close to somebody firing live rounds.
Yes.
Anyway, like I said, eventually we'd see one guy missing in the morning. They weeded out a few of us, but they didn't weed out as many as they wanted to. And then finally, the graduation day came, and one of the ploys they used when they trained us, they would bring us into these closed barracks with no air conditioning, and all the windows were closed. And they would lecture us to the point where everybody was dozing off.
Oh.
And one of the scenarios was, at the time, Bortac, when we initiated, decided to go with the Ruger Mini 14 for one reason or another. It was easy to carry, easy to tear down. So the marshals would give us one demonstration of tearing it down and putting it back together, and then expect us to go up there and do the same. Now, I had never taken apart a rifle, torn it down, put it back together, like many of us there. Well, yeah, it took us a while to get the hang of it. Mm-hmm. But that was the ploy that they were using. They weren't really teaching us. They were just shoving things at us to continue the aggravation.
Yeah.
And it continued right up until graduation day, when we finally said, thank God, we're almost done. So graduation day, actually the day before graduation day, they haul us all into the barracks. Again, no air conditioning, no air circulation, and they have the chief marshal give us a long, droning talk on God knows what. And some of us were starting to fall asleep, and I've actually got that on video with a couple of the Bortacs dozing off, and then the marshals start yelling. They start yelling at us. They said, here we are, we're trying to give you guys some training and instruction, and you're dozing off. You're all going for a 5-mile hike with your backpacks.
Oh.
They heard us all outside, but before the run, they have us do 100 push-ups in the gravel, and I can still see some of the guys actually cut their hands on the gravel, from doing push-ups, 100 push-ups. And then everybody gets up and we're going, oh my God, we're done.
Yeah.
We hadn't slept for weeks, we hadn't really eaten, and now we're going on a 5-mile forest run. And then lo and behold, the marshals all turn around and start chuckling. They said, okay, we were only joking. Welcome to Bortac. You've all made it.
Man, that must have been something.
So everybody's going, yeah, wait till we meet up with you guys someday. And they were coming to us to shake our hands. Nobody shook their hands. Everybody was so teed off from what they had pulled the whole time we were there up until the last possible minute. Anyway, like I said, we ended up the next day, a formal graduation ceremony with Buck Brandemew, Chief of the Border Patrol, coming to congratulate us and take photos with him. So there was a lot of support at that time from headquarters. Shortly after that, we all gladly headed home. I returned to Holden Sector, and like I mentioned, showed the video and pretty much discouraged everybody in the sector from joining Bortac. They said, you gotta be crazy, Labbe, to have, endured that, gone through that.
This concludes part 1 of episode 18, our interview with retired Associate Chief Gary Labbe and the history of Bortac 1. But this is just half the story. Now go listen to part 2. Honor first, honor always.